So really, salt plays a gigantic role in the quality of the flavor burst of food. And it just occurred to me, just because I'm like making a roast, and there's so many kinds of food that sneak salt in, and you think, oh, that's soy sauce. No, 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 it's salt. Or and if you think like, oh, that's au jus. No, that's salt. Everything we're doing with food and meat and potato and vegetable and all this stuff, there's always this factor of salt and different kinds of salt even. But I think it's funny too. You have to ask yourself, because that's one of the things that I do, is I try to distill down to the most critical component of something. And so you have to ask yourself, when you're buying these very expensive mixes of flavorings, how much is the salt persuading the experience? Because, when you get older, you think of things a little differently in terms of like a reaction of let's say, a chemical spectrum. And like when you're young, it's very simple. It's like an Eggo is an Eggo, and a Pop Tart is a Pop Tart, and all these things. But when you're older, your taste buds get a little bit different, and you start to think like how sugary it is, how salty it is, and those kinds of things hit you a little bit more. For some people, I guess, maybe just me, but they hit you a little bit more than what's actually occurring in the composite. Anyway, so I think it's kind of funny. Is it a hoodwink with these companies producing so many things where the critical ingredient is salt? Because without that salt, there's nothing. And like if you try to cook without salt, it's always going to have this kind of tang, stale, bland. Then when you sprinkle that salt on, it's like an activator. Literally, it's like a chemical process that turns the food into delicious if you get the amount right. Of course, you can go crazy and do it wrong. But you'll find in cooking that that's one of the things they do is they have it sort of like baked into the layers of the cooking process so that the salt is different experience, so it hits you differently as you taste it over time and eat the meal over time. But I just thought it was hysterical that, whatever kind of food you're making, even Italian food, I mean, how much salt is in that? And it's just like there's so much freaking salt, and there's something to how it impacts the first experience that we have when we taste food. And then there's the secondary waves, and that salt either will open up the floodgates to allow that in the taste buds, or it will not. So getting that balance right is one of those things that makes you like really good at cooking for either yourself or for large numbers of people, because you understand like when it's too much, and how much more you can sneak in than you realize, because there's so many layers of it that are happening. And it's just remarkable to me, because like everything that I buy, I noticed that there's just this massive amount of salt first. Now, what I'm saying is, it's funny because salt is cheap. It's very cheap. It's like $1, and you can get a giant thing of salt. And you can get more expensive versions, the granulated and the kosher and all this. But in the end, it's cheap. And so when you go and you buy these herbs and all these things to, make food more flavorful, with the combinations, the mixtures, like Montreal steak seasoning and all these things, it's mainly the salt that's doing the work, is what I'm trying to say. The salt is the talent. And so the other ones are sort of piggybacking off of the hard work that the salt is doing. But what I'm getting at is like, how much money is getting poured down the drain because we're fooling ourselves into thinking that this, $8 mixture is worth so much, because when we ate it fresh on some piece of meat or something, it really was the most incredible experience. You can sit and eat a tomato with salt and have the most incredible experience. And it's the same thing with beef. The more fresh salt and fresh beef you have, it's like it's going to be much more amazing. So I think it's one of those things where we're kidding ourselves, at least me, where we're buying these things, these mixtures, when really the salt is the critical, the worker of the mix. So I just wanted to mention that little thought about how important the balance of salt is in cooking.